Peace, peace. So we have entered officially this time of Libra. And when we look at Libra, what we see here, you feel me?
So the Lord of the foreign lands, the foreign countries, we understand that when you look at the different stellas, the Mare Stella, and
So you look at significance of different star systems and animals and zoo types, and you know what I'm saying, their significance. When you look at the California bear, Ursa, and the significance of America, and the laying out of America, and the alignment of this landmass, especially when you look at these particular times of the equinox, right? And what's significant when you look at the equinox in these different periods of time is that certain observations can only take place here in America. Like, what I mean by that, in order to observe certain things in the exact time, meaning like when we say there's a grand rising, there's a grand setting. So in order for this universal time, right? So like everybody has had, today is Tuesday. Everybody has had their noon for this coming Tuesday, right? So, you know what I'm saying, the grand setting for everyone's day, the universal day, takes place only in one location. So there's only one land location one could be in the evening of the new day. And so this is where a lot of significance when you look at midnight and the significance of midnight and witching hours and certain times of the night. You have to understand the positioning of where the sun is at certain times of the night. And when we look at the sun setting, right, and the goddess Nut, or Nut, I call her Nut, because when you look at this this goddess Nut, and this in her and how she's depicted with her mouth facing the west, right? And if you understand what takes place here in the eastern border of the Pacific, where the sun enters the mouth, right, of what we call the Golden Gate. And it's this Golden Gate bridge that loops the day into the evening, into a new day. So this is how the ending of a day is the beginning of a new day in the nightfall for only one landmass. Only one location begins the universal day at night. So when we look at creation and time, this is a key component into why geopolitics had to change coordinates, why you look at certain periods as dark ages and different things. You have to grasp why these things are. So when we look here at this depiction, you see here there's Teotihuacan. Now, the reason why I got Teotihuacan right there on the top is because that location there on Teotihuacan, they call it the Ave of the Dead, right? Or the Street of the Dead. And on this Street of the Dead, you got the Pyramid of the Moon, right? You got the Pyramid of the Serpent, and you got the Pyramid of the Sun, right? Now, what the significance of this alignment is with Orion's belt, right? The same way the Giza Plateau and many other, right, alignments and monuments are designed to, right, according to this measure. So when you look at the particular coordinates and the Earth's coordinates and how time and the rotation of the different time of the sun is going, when you look at swallowing the seed or you know what I'm saying, it's funny. It's really funny because we say a lot of these things jokingly, you know what I'm saying, when referring to, you know what I'm saying, getting oral head, getting head, and what have you, right? But when you look at this, at what this is right here, right? When you look at the landmass here, this eastern border of the Pacific, and you look at the middle of the Pacific Ocean, what they call the Ring of Fire, you know what I'm saying? And then you have the East Indies of where Indonesia, after you cross to Australia, the southern portion of Australia, Melanesia, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands. If you look at the wind patterns and different things that bring you into these different lands at certain times, these things are all significant with trade winds and how the ancients did universal, right? We talk about the universal. When you look at the mound builders and that civilization, that prehistoric civilization, this is talking about an empire, not just you know what I'm saying? We're talking about an empire that's universal. So when we talk about kingdoms, we're not talking about one location. We're talking about the whole material realm is in order on this functionality under the alignment of this universal law. So this is how movement and time, trade and functionality, import and export, all these things, economics, currency was being ran under the heavens. So when one violated or crossed or took more than he was supposed to at a time, right? One tried to come to the land and leave out of the land. This is why measuring scales and toll gates to this day have an effect. So this teaching also was implied in death into the afterlife, right? This hall of judgment, or this, many have seen this scene of judgment where you have a man's heart versus the feather and the wing. Now that is also a part of the daily crossing one would have to do, you know what I'm saying, leaving from one land to another land, especially when you understand the significance of the land of the dead and the land of the sunset and the land of mourning and lamenting and praising and the dancing and a lot of the worship that took place in these lands. So these lands, a lot of people wanted to be buried in these lands for the main purpose of that the sun, the universal sun, sets here in this land. So it was said if you were buried in the land right before the sunset, you would become an immortal. You would live forever, right? Because of how this time, space, and continuum, right? It says, what verses is it the Torah describes Solomon's expedition to the west? It's many, you know what I'm saying? But Solomon's mostly in the Kings, First Kings, when you look at his Navy fleets and what he had around the 10th chapter. You probably want to, I would read, you know what I'm saying, First Kings 6. I would read all the Kings. I mean, but if you want to hit it with the Navy fleets and what happened, what he had, and a lot of his mines and goals. It says, do you know the supergalactic coordinate system? I mean, when you say supergalactic coordinate system, I know this observational with the senses, right? What we can visualize and see with our senses, and what we can observe and calculate through the signs of heaven. That's the coordinate system that I'm referring to. Perfection, right? We're talking about wholeness. Perfection is how these because these coordinates are just numbers at the end of the day, right? When we're talking about the coordinate system, but all these things have a correlation within, you know what I'm saying, direction and shape and geometrics. So the changing of the coordinate system, just like the changing of the fall back, going back in time an hour, is so that currency exchange can be done based upon this time flow, currency flow of the 24 hours and periods of daylight, sunlight that one has to do labor or do exchange or to work. So a lot of these things, as we see now, holidays, and a lot of these things are always aligned on certain days. In order for that to happen, certain measurements and certain things have to take place every 4 years, every 1460 days. You know what I'm saying? These things have to be reobserved, recalculated to make sure to maintain that the same coordinate system is going on according to the months and how they have them of the 365 days, point something, however they calculate a year, an annual year, right? That has to be observed every year. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I mean? We are not connected with the nature we tell time, we don't see what time it is. You know what I'm saying? We tell time, we don't see what time it is. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know what I'm saying, that coordinate system, when you look at GPS, when you look at universal time zones, that coordinate system is based upon the sun's solar rotation, right, in an annual period. That is placed into different months, but that is basically what the coordinate system is. Just every 15 degrees is the speed is supposedly the sun is moving to give us 24 hours of time. You see what I'm saying? So that time coordinate system to measure what we put into months and different things is to see how long it takes, right, in this period of time for a cycle, revolution to take place. And that's how we have the 365 day point such and such, the 52 weeks and seven days. Comes from observing every day the sun going into the mouth of Nut and being swallowed by the mouth of Nut. So these things had to be tallied. So when you look at California and calculations and a calendar, these things all possess Cal, right? And when you look at California, the bear, and the different northern hemisphere, especially after the summer, this particular time. So when you look at the scriptures in Amos, the Most High said he puts us between the summer house and the winter house. And when you look at these different tropics and these different measures and how the tropics play a role in the calculating of the time, because that's the measurement to know the annual precession, right? Based upon where the sun is every day along the horizon. Someone has to observe that every time the grand sunset takes place. So this is why there was dark ages and different things. If no one's physically in the land to observe and calculate and tally and mark these things, right? So this is how kings kept their reign. And why historically, if you want to have history, you have to look at the reign of kings historically to get documented information, because especially kings that had empires, that had kingdoms, right? Their reign and their kingdom was marked year after year after year, right? So these things are essential when you look at the history, right? If we want to try to understand how different cultures calculated their time, look at their kings and how they calculated the reign of their kings, and you'll see the movement when you look at especially the pilgrimages, right, of different cultures, ancient cultures that had intercalary calendar system. You know what I'm saying? You said I'm about to for sure hit me when you do, bro. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna be I'm gonna be right here, man. So when you look at the calendars and the formula of the calendars and Kol, the voice, in Hebrew when they say the voice of the Lord, Kol, Kol, you know what I'm saying, is one of the words used. And when you look at the voice, right, Kol, and to hear, if you look in the book, you know what I'm saying, in the text, when you hear when they talk about the 10 Commandments, they heard that orally. So in order to hear or to doesn't necessarily mean in the physical sense of how we think hearing, right? When one tells you to take heed or to shema, right? To observe, to hear, when you look at the heavens, which is shamayim, and one tells you to hearken or to listen, shema, are they telling you to look at the heavens to listen, to understand the signs of what they're trying to project to you? Because that's what we're saying in language. You see what I'm saying? And so when you look at the formations of the heavens and the signs that are within the heaven and the forming of language, these things is universally the same. The functionalities, certain sounds, certain cultures can only say the sounds differently, but everything's the same. So when you look at the calculation of time, this coast, California, and this eastern border of the Pacific, and in South America, Peru, or Lake Titicaca, where we find these Reed-style boats and these different trade winds and these different tropical regions are significant because you have winds, you have certain winds at certain times of the year because of the movement, right, and the motion of the soul. It brings about certain winds and certain flows to where you'll be brought into certain lands. So this is how why they call them trade winds. So when you look at trade winds and doing trade, import and export, you have to understand the Americas and corn. So when you look at corn and the Americas and the fertility of the mound builders, the prehistoric, we're talking about prehistoric before. We got to understand, we're talking about before the biblical flood, before any of these biblical narratives, Israelites, any of these things, right? Tribes of Judah, 12 tribes, these things came afterwards. So this is why the mythology, when you look at in the book of Joshua, right, he tells them to do not as the people who were here before the flood, the fathers before the flood. And so you got to understand, when you look at pre-flood, the Americas is key because they hold a lot of this universal culture here with us. Me, you, all of us, naturally. You know what I'm saying? It's already within us. Just like how we talk about getting head, and we already talking about creation, and we don't even be realizing what we saying. We talking about we getting brains. She gave me brains, or you know what I'm saying? Like, we say things on a daily, knowingly or unknowingly. We are telecally kinetic, understand everything. Do you think fragments of the Old Testament was well, yes. Well, for us, we have to say so, because we look at the formation of the English language to form the biblical text in the English that we know, that, you know what I'm saying, we don't have ancient scrolls that we read, so we read, you know what I'm saying, the printed press versions of these texts. These things were modified and taken from the different codices here in the Americas. I mean, mainly when you look at Jesus and Mary, that is a remaking. When you look at the Black Madonna in the Americas, and you know what I'm saying, the fertility and the winds, what we're talking about right now, and corn, and Joseph is someone in the Bible who was the first historically that was an Israelite to be made a king, in a sense, here in the Americas. You know what I'm saying? That was on a level to where we can try to track this historically through the Bible. So Joseph is a key person, and if you really want to look into some of the you know what I'm saying, the hijacks, like niggas say, or what have you, with some of these texts and stuff. If you look into Joseph and his rulership as a pharaoh, you know what I'm saying, see, as an Israelite pharaoh, well, I mean, he's, you know what I'm saying, he's the first one of Israel to become a king, Joseph. A lot of times people think of kings in Israel, they forget that Joseph was the first. Like, he had the dream, right? And he told them niggas, and them niggas was like, nigga, we finna sell you. You know what I'm saying? Whoa. But anyways, it's a lot of animals and crops in the Bible that's on. Right, that too. You know what I'm saying? And that's where the Spanish recordings and the Spanish records are good in use, because then you'll see Hernan Cortez records when he came to Mexico, and he's like, how do they not only do they have old and new world animals, they have, you know what I'm saying, exotic animals that you'll find in Asia and different things and what have you. You know what I'm saying? When you look at a lot of, especially the old world birds, you know what I'm saying, what they try to say are new world birds, they're actually older than the old world birds. And even like certain things like with the monkeys and how some of them have disposable thumbs here in America, that's only a trait or only something that is here in this land. But this is the new world, so it doesn't you know what I'm saying, we don't harp on these things when we look at not just plant, but if you deal with botany plants and stuff, and the geniuses of plants, and you look at the genetic name of a lot of these plants and different things, and it's telling you about the significance of this landmass that we own right now, and the power that we have, being the elements and the material, and connected to that unknown. You know what I'm saying? We connected to that unknown and know the unknown without knowing. You know what I'm saying? We know without knowing. And you can, at any moment, through, you know what I'm saying, meditation, discipline, ignite knowledge and certain things that you know already that you don't know. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, so when we look at the procession of the Ave of the Dead, when you look at Mut, or in Hebrew, Mut means death, right? So when you look at death and the mouth of death, or what they call the kiss of death, right? You have to understand when the soul dies, sun dies, and how these, you know what I'm saying, sun dies, the end, in the end. The sun always dies in the end. Shalom. The soul dies in the end. So when you look at the Indies and how they explain these lands in the Greek New Testament, when they try to explain these lands of the America, they refer to them as foreign lands. And in the East, and in the Old Testament, when they're referring to anything, is gonna say Canaanite, Phoenician, unknown origin, but of a Canaanite, Phoenician origin. That's telling you it's coming from the Americas. I mean, that ain't what it's saying, but that's what I'm saying that it's saying. that ain't what I'm saying, but I don't know if that makes sense. Or what when you look at that, so we look at the foreign lands in the Greek, what they call the lands abroad, right? They're referring to these lands, and it has never been something that's only unknown until after post-Columbian. So after the Spanish and the New World, quote unquote, New World conquering, that is when all of a sudden these histories and these things are new. But at the time of the Old Testament, right, in these particular times of BC, whatever, you know what I'm saying, historically, these times are supposed to be during the time of the Roman eras and the Greek eras. These things, the Americas was not unknown. You know what I'm saying? That shit was known of, and they came here to learn here and to hear from the heavens, because you have to come here to hear from the heavens, or else you can't see the signs of heaven unless you hear, like, in its proper time. Meaning, you can't see the first evening of Wednesday unless you hear Tuesday. You understand what I'm saying? Evening comes first here. This is the land of evening. You know what I'm saying? This is the land of Eve. When you look at Eve, Ava, Ama, or however, you know what I'm saying, many different feminine deities and things they try to put them on. It says, hold on, chaos, security, tent, pay, add, hook, to the sign, cross. You look at Mut, you got the waters, you know what I'm saying? What they say is the 13th letter, you know what I'm saying? And when you look at Mut, right? And I'm glad you put that there. If you see here, right, this hieroglyph, right? You see this hieroglyph right here. It says a painted wall relief. Note that the ibis, you see the ibis right here on the left, right? You got Mut and hieroglyph mouth. This, when they say X marks the spot, right? And death and the place, you know what I'm saying, where the sun deaths. This is what takes place on the winter solstice. So when you look at the southern crossing and the winter solstice, And this marking of Christendom, this is how all these things were, were talked about. And they're different, teaching. You gotta watch these police, they fuck shit over here. Put this shit out. These bitch ass niggas. Always want to fuck with that nigga. But yeah, so when you look at Mut, and like you were saying about the waters and the stream, the blood, and even sperm, right, can be Mem. When you look at Mem, and then like you brought out the tent peg and the connection, right? You see it, you can see it right here, in this hieroglyph, right? You got the top, you got the mark on the top. You can't really see it because my head in the way, but right here, when you look at the mouth of death and the primordial mounds and the primordial beginnings, and how the Proverbs 8 talks about the depths and the waters in the depths, and how in the beginning, when the earth was without form and void and darkness, right? When you look at darkness and Sasak, or like you said, chaos, right? And then the order, and you look at, the signs and the connection. You have to understand the beginnings. That's essential, and when we study, these things universally, the language, different cultures, the function is more important than the sound. Sometimes, certain vowels and different things not the same, or even consonants, like, the CH can be an S in another language, that sound ch, or so different things that they may get you off, they may have a K instead of the C, or they just those people, that genetics, that's how they make those sounds, you feel me? Oh shit, hold on, this other people shit though. It's already night on this side, right? So we look, it's Wednesday night, right? So right now it's Wednesday night, while it's Wednesday on the other side of the earth, right? And so that's why here in the measuring, this nigga's already celebrating Wednesday, you on Wednesday night, and I'm still here measuring, looking at the sun to see where it's at on the horizon line. So this is why calculation and observing here on this coast was essential. It's just a serious question. Did pale people come before their time? This is why they manifest as without carbon. The reason why I'm asking, because based on what you're saying, everything needs to manifest in order. Well, they used to say, certain perverted, right, thoughts is what created, right, vanity, and man seeing beauty in recessive genes is what gave insight, or whatever, all this, many different things. But that's a good question. Where did white people come from, basically, is what you're asking, right? And one key thing, like one thing I noticed, but one thing I noticed when the Moors, or the ancient empires, the way that they divided the kingdoms of the lands, they never were in the tropical regions on any landmass on this earth, and or even a subtropical region. So when we look at like the center of the earth, the core of the earth, the cavity of the earth, and these caves and different things in these different regions, this is the inhabitants, that we find these pale skinned people in on any landmass, throughout the earth. Now, many say that they were driven there by the ancients to live amongst there, and then they rebelled and invaded into the lands that were, in the tropics. And it's many different mythologies, to how recessive genes and recessive traits have came about. And You know what I'm saying? They say the commandments is what's supposed to be a protection. You know what I'm saying? Sleeping with your sister. What would be, you know what I'm saying? What could be the effect of that? You know what I'm saying? Genetically. Sleeping, you know what I'm saying? Many different, you know what I'm saying? So even in the book of Joshua, it mentions the mixing of genes that was being done at that particular time. And even today, this shit is being done, like, you know what I'm saying, the taking. But where did the white sperm come from that formed the pale skin? It only, besides, you know what I'm saying, erosion and sin and the access that was perfection. I mean, I couldn't tell you, honestly. I could give you some. I had a whole caveman theory. I can give you a whole bunch of theories, but at the end of the day, they really gonna be some theories. I couldn't really tell you where they came from, but that's it. I always think about that shit. Like, what causes in the sperm? Where did that sperm come from? If everything was made perfectly, what was the first error that occurred to allow for this perfection to be broken and to be spliced into, you know what I'm saying, other than men's mind understanding the creation, and then take, okay, if I understand the creation, if I understand your genetics, right, can you create a GMO of that? If I understand how an orange seed needs to work and function, can I create a genetically modified orange that, you know what I'm saying? Like, so, you know what I mean? The thoughts of men have created and invented a lot of things that under the universal law should not have been created. And so this is why, you know what I'm saying, to keep it 100, this is why genetic killings first were supposedly be done by the authorities. They were supposed to genetically cleanse people, you know what I'm saying, from the earth that had these mutations. You know what I'm saying? If you look in the scriptures, people that had certain pigmentations in their skin got put to death. And so when you look at that, right, you know what I'm saying, if your child was retarded, he couldn't come into the temple type shit. Like, so when we look at it, it was seen as something sinful when you look at it, right? It wasn't necessarily like, oh, the motherfucker look funny, you know what I'm saying, head bigger than everybody else. But nah, it was like, oh, you did something to cause this. You see what I'm saying? You did something sinful to cause this effect. Because the way we understand creation and the seed, right? If I plant a seed, a good apple seed is going to produce good apple fruit, right? So if I produce an apple seed and it grows up a tree, and then the fruit is, you know what I'm saying, rotten, and it's not what it's supposed to be, you're going to say the seed is bad. You know what I'm saying? So, you know what I mean? That's a, you know what I'm saying, deep thing. It says, hold on, oh shit. The men got turned in apes and elephants. Check the Hindustan mythology, descendants of the fallen of albino, non-human beings mating with humans. Kind of hear you, hybrid. Yeah, even in the book of Job, which is one of the oldest books, in the 30th chapter, it gives some, you know what I'm saying, some biblical, you know what I'm saying, references as well. You know what I'm saying? The book of Jasher, I don't know if you fuck with it, but the 4th chapter of Jasher also talks about that as well. And that is why, you know what I'm saying, certain races genetically were supposed to be wiped out. The Most High told, you know what I'm saying, niggas to kill all the Amalek. You know what I'm saying? And niggas did it. And it was a consequence for it. You feel me? So, you know what I mean? It's funny to see how trading places, right? And, you know what I'm saying? But perfection and genetic perfection was something that was serious. to the death, to where, you know what I'm saying, if you were imperfect, it was seen as you had a sin. It was something sinful. You know what I'm saying? You did a sinful act. That a sinful act had to have created that child. So the way they would look at it is that sin is what created the pale skin. Now, some take that to be the sin that took place from Eve and the serpent in the garden. You know what I'm saying? But ultimately, that's, when you look at it, that's the best answer I can. Sin is what created the imperfection of what we call the pale skin, and that's why they need correction. And that's why these teachings were originally for the heathen, but we're not in the proper person, so we're not doing what Exodus 19 told us to do, which is to be a nation of priests, a nation of judges, a nation of that. You know what I'm saying? Instead, we trying to keep our own teachings instead of holding those who we created the teachings for. You know what I'm saying? This is not it shouldn't be a struggle for us to be righteous. It shouldn't be hard to be righteous. It should be natural to be righteous, right? So when we look at these things, these teachings originally, the law originally, and all these different things originally were for those who were not of the perfection. You see what I'm saying? That needed the correction. That needed to know not to fuck your mama. That needed to know what type of meat you should eat. That needed to know, you know what I'm saying? Don't fuck your, you know what I'm saying? Don't steal this. Don't do that, because they didn't have anything. When you're not within an agricultural zone, a subtropic, if you don't have an agricultural society that's built in the civilization, you have to invade, you have to conquer, and you have to force the people that you conquer and invade to teach you how to maintain and sustain the land. And so, you know what I'm saying, when you look at all these things, you know what I'm saying, there's many different theories on how the pale skin was created. But when we look at the pale skin genetically, right, and his hatred for nature, his hatred for creation, his hatred for life, his hatred for the earth, his hatred for the woman, his mistreatment of the woman, his use of the woman, right, his neglect of the woman, the neglect of the child, neglect of the earth, we have to see, you know what I'm saying, with our spiritual eyes deeper than, you know what I'm saying, and start doing some judgment and start providing some uprightness within the earth, you know what I'm saying, to these people that are foreverly wicked, foreverly needing correction and needing instruction. So this is why a nation, a priesthood must always exist in this earth. We must produce more of us in order to sustain and protect this earth. Now, is that because they're non-human? I don't know. But what I do know is that they are anti-nature. They like genetically modified things, and they like to destroy the natural seeded things in order to be able to function and consume things that don't even have life. Like, they don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, these motherfuckers can eat rubber and plastic and meat sauce and live and make you think that's what you need to eat type shit. You know what I'm saying? Let's see, hold on. It says, your pale skin has been leprosy at that time. It says, defiling the balance of the natural order. Leprosy is like the serpent who Cain came from. Right? When you look at, Cain, that's another, another thing. We look at the land of Canaan and why it's called the land of Canaan and what took place with Ham, right? Ham and Noah. When Ham uncovered his father's nakedness, right? Canaan was cursed. And if you look in the Torah, right, and what it means to uncover nakedness, could be, the wife of a man, or even the land, or a possession of that man. It's possession, right? So when Ham uncovered that of Noah, Canaan ended up cursed. Now, I'm willing to speculate that's because Ham fucked his father's wife, which would align with the commandments of uncovering, your father's nakedness, which is your father's possession or your father's wife. And when you look at that, right, in the Canaanites, in the land of Canaan, and why when Joshua came into the land, why they had to pretty much commit genocide, you have to understand that some are born wicked. They are seeded in wickedness. You know what I'm saying? They are forever bad fruit, and they forever will produce bad fruit. You know what I'm saying? And only the universal laws that we have displayed and projected and taught can provide the correction that we need within this material realm to exist with these non-human, anti-life, anti-creation, GMO. You know what I'm saying? It says, what is the most proficient priesthood of modern? Damn. I mean, that Melchizedek order still kind of heavy. Even when you look at Ethiopia, you know what I'm saying? Like, they still going hard for, for Shem and for, the Semitic language is protected, and a lot of when we look at what we call the landmass we call Africa, a lot of countries there have protected the tongue of the Semitic language for a long time. And so when you look at Giz and that priesthood, the Negus, and the Nagas, which is also connected with India and understand a lot of the mythologies as well, with the ancient, Kushite, which, Kushite goes beyond Ham lineage into a prehistoric significance when you look at it in those that came from the darkness, out of the darkness, and the Z people, the tree people, the people here in this land, that refer to themselves as Hyksos as well. The Amu people, you'll find them on the walls, and what have you. But when you look at the Amu and these Asiatics and Mut and Deaf, and the crossing of that, these trade winds that bring you right into this time, the southern crossing at the time. That's why they call that motherfucker Australia. Austria, when you look at that, that's south. And north and south, these twins, this is summer and winter. And when you look at these different houses of summer and winter, and the protection of the land of the Americas to be situated, this is why it's always been a storehouse, a storage house for goods, for food here in this land, because we did import and export on both sides, both coasts. You got the Atlantic, you got the Pacific, you got the Caribbean functionality popping. You got, down in Brazil on the Pacific side, all the way down to the Andes, all the way into Antarctica. when you look at the Americas, this is the only landmass that touches from the center of the earth to the extremity. I don't say it touches, but we go through both hemispheres. We like dead, like, you know what I'm saying? When you look at where this land, this is why dark ages and shit, when niggas couldn't come here, like, you feel me? Like, this land is a big deal. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, we in Wednesday night. Nigga, we in the how we just had Tuesday and then Wednesday night already though. Like, just think about that though. Like, that shit crazy when you really think about it. What's up about us? We low-key rocking in this bitch. Let me light back up. The police done dipped on a nigga. You know what I'm saying? Let me light back up. You know what I'm saying? Yo, you putting this on YouTube? Yeah, if it'll let me save it. Yep. Matter of fact, I'm about to save it and come back in.